This year, everybody's been asking, why 420? If cannabis has been legalized, why is 420 actually needed? Well, on October 17th, cannabis was legalized across the country in Canada. It was a monumental day that was celebrated nationwide by those curious about cannabis, those who use it from time to time in secret, as well as those who fought long and hard to get us to where we're at today. Make no mistake, cannabis legalization didn't happen because our government came to this bright idea on their own. Much the opposite, in fact. We use this opportunity to inform our government that we're not happy with the status quo. Some could argue that activists will never be happy with what they're given, and while that may be true for some, that's a foolish assumption to make, since legalization, many have given up the fight, so to speak, and even joined with licensed producers. There are those as well who simply want what is right and fair. Patience might not be our strongest virtue, but it doesn't change the fact that there's issues that need to be addressed. Those who have fought for legalization and are experienced with its commerce are being pushed aside in favor of government folk who have absolutely zero knowledge or experience in the industry. We see a culture that we built in the shadows of a Gestapo-like enforcement being pulled piece by piece into this legal market, but now these pieces are completely out of order. If the federal government was truly wanting to protect the public from the dangers of cannabis, they would first eliminate the criminal sanctions of it. This is not to say that there should be zero regulation. However, a balance of who's prosecuted and for what, for example, is absolutely stark in contrast. Why is it that a medical dispensary can be raided around the same time that a licensed producer is caught selling non-licensed cannabis? The same stuff that the dispensaries have been selling. And while the employees of this dispensary are facing 14 years in prison, employees at Bonafide have absolutely zero criminal prosecution. They broke the same law and sold the same product, only one has real consequences. This is hypocrisy at its finest, and a perfect example of how certain groups of people are immune to the law that the rest of the public has to follow. All the while, the government regulation is stealing the bit of culture that remains and spitting it back out as a garbled mock-up of what looks nothing like the market that existed before, and even still after legalization. While this may actually be the idea and intent, it's simply ridiculous that the majority of those who consume cannabis see this government facade for what it is. This is why the government is on a downward spiral in regards to their desired intent of removing the black market and are destined to fail unless some parts of the Cannabis Act are revisited and rewritten. Stripped over regulation is rampant and rears its head in the form of excessive taxing schemes on both producers as well as retailers and the consumers who buy the product. When people are able to get a higher quality product cheaper and more conveniently than using the legal source, they'll never make the switch. Overregulation also exists in the form of the oligarchy that the Ontario government and others have created by making themselves the sole provider of cannabis to the province that they belong to. Not only does this and has this created supply chain issues, but it also creates a stale market where the prices across retailers can barely vary on a dollar, not to mention product that's been prepackaged months beforehand for sale at an unknown point in the future. Packages for recreational users are labeled without expiration dates, yet the government screams at the underground market for accountability and quality control. Yet more hypocrisy. In 2015 to 2016, there were 77,000 alcohol-related hospitalizations across Canada, which is 2,000 more than all of the heart-related ones put together. There's 4,000 to 5,000 deaths across Canada per year related to alcohol. Cannabis has never killed a user by direct use ever, but we're well aware of the effects of alcohol. You can literally poison yourself and die. Which brings into question packaging for cannabis, clearly meant to protect young people and deter misuse, but also clearly warn the user about risks surrounding what they're about to consume. Things like addiction statistics, warnings of psychiatric episodes or mental illnesses, even comparing cannabis to the consumption of cigarettes. Perhaps alcohol should be sold in the same manner, considering how much of a health burden it is to the hospitals and the public. 5,000 alcohol deaths related deaths per year. Why isn't alcohol sold in preventative packaging to warn people that domestic violence fueled by alcohol can make victims 60 to 70% more likely to end up in the hospital or even dead? Why don't bartenders required to dispense beer and liquor in packaging wrapped in warnings meant to remind the customer that the product they've just bought is potentially dangerous to not only them, but others around them once they've consumed it? What about an excise sticker? Anyone can make alcohol in their basement and can get a license to sell it without issue. More hypocrisy. Pocket lining and money is a big factor here, but that's an issue for another day. At the foundation of it all, and the whole point of this, is that there's only so much hypocrisy that can happen before we're being told one thing and they're doing another. They're actually telling us one thing about everything and doing another. Another term for this, generally speaking, is gaslighting. That's the focal point for this year's 420 event, and it's no more gaslighting. The amount of talk that both the federal government as well as our provincial governments have done in regards to the goal of protecting the youth and keeping profits out of the hands of criminals is significantly substantial. The amount of things that they've done to actually work towards that goal, and rather than against it, is almost equally as staggering. Time and time again, one thing is said and another is done or happens. Every time they over-regulate the market in some way, they open up the avenue to the revenue of the underground market. Prices too high for example, shop at one of the hundreds, if not thousands, of online dispensaries that have opened up across the country. Dirt cheap prices and price breaks are increasingly abundant in a market that on the legal side is taxed more heavily than any other substance in its class by far. The ridiculous notion that cannabis is legal to possess in Ontario but hardly legal to consume unless you're in one of the 1%, generally speaking, is profoundly impressive. Cannabis can't be consumed in parks, most sidewalks, anywhere where an open window might be present, or even in your own backyard if you happen to have neighbors that disagree with the smell. Meanwhile, the icing on the cake is that the Smoke-Free Ontario Act prevents social areas or lounges from existing, where those who would want to consume their cannabis could do so. Here in Ontario, they have literally fooled the public into believing one thing, that cannabis is legal, but the reality is quite another. Cannabis is definitely legal for some, but not for everyone. The government's been lying to the public for years in regards to cannabis at both the federal and provincial levels to varying degrees of success. We're tired of being told one thing when we know better. We're taking back our reality and we won't be told we're criminals when the only ones who call us that are the people making these ridiculous rules. Cannabis was legalized because brave people broke unjust laws and fought their way through the criminal justice system. It was legalized because hundreds of thousands of people across the country put their freedoms and sometimes their lives on the line to fight back against laws that we all know are wrong and shouldn't exist in the first place. Canada has yet to apologize for all the people that have been screwed over by all of the cannabis prohibition that they've had for the last 50 years. Think about that. If they legalized it because it was the right thing to do, as they say, to protect the youth and keep the profits out of hands of criminals, why hasn't the Cannabis Act achieved any of that? Why haven't those whose lives have been ruined by unjust laws received formal apologies from the governments who have put them in that position in the first place, as they do when they recognize other similar unjust situations? If it was really the right thing to do, they should immediately move to recognize the people both responsible and displaced by this monumental change in legislation. Instead, they won't. They'll find more ways to generate revenue while convincing the public not to indulge in the thing that they'd like to. It'd be a shame if connoisseurs became able to grow for themselves, obliterating profit margins of the legal market. In conclusion, over the years, the government has become a master at manipulation, and evidence of this, aside from the bit mentioned here, is widespread and doesn't take a computer genius to do. What the governments, both provincial and federal, fail to remember, or simply blatantly and foolishly ignore, is that they're attempting to wrestle cannabis and everything associated with it out of the hands of the people that have fought tooth and nail to force their hands to the point that they've failed in the war on drugs, and specifically cannabis. From a collective of people who have built a countrywide network, sharing not only cannabis itself, but knowledge and skills, from folks who have spent time in jail for cannabis offenses both minor and indictable, from people who will not allow the insanity of what's essentially the government gaslighting its own public on issues surrounding cannabis. We refuse to stay silent on everything we've been through and won't allow truths to be stretched in order to serve this agenda. Thank you.
Le 17 octobre dernier, le cannabis a été légalisé au Canada. C'est une journée monumentale célébrée partout dans la nation par les gens curieux ainsi que par ceux qui se sont battus pendant des années pour y arriver. Je dois vous préciser une chose. Le cannabis n'est pas devenu légal seulement à cause de notre gouvernement. Bien au contraire, en fait. C'est le produit de plusieurs années d'activisme et de travail dont plusieurs personnes ici ont fait preuve. Avant d'aborder le sujet du 20 avril de cette année, l'on doit se rappeler de ce qui différencie Ottawa par rapport à toutes les autres villes du monde. L'événement se situe à quelques pas de la Chambre des communes, soit où siège notre gouvernement fédéral. Dans aucune autre ville au monde que le 20 avril est-il célébré aussi proche du plus haut niveau gouvernemental. Nous tenons à informer notre gouvernement que nous ne sommes pas heureux avec le statu quo. L'un pourrait prétendre que nous, les activistes, ne serons jamais comblés avec la situation que le gouvernement nous a offert, mais ce n'est pas le cas. Depuis la légalisation, plusieurs d'entre nous ont décidé de se joindre aux producteurs licenciés et d'abandonner leur militantisme. Nous devons néanmoins adresser quelques points. Ceux qui se sont battus pour les derniers 5, 10, 15 ans et plus ne sont pas consultés pour leur expertise. Le gouvernement préfère embaucher des gens qui n'ont aucune expérience dans le domaine. Nous voyons une culture cachée, secrète et des intérêts corporatifs qui guident les choix gouvernementaux. L'industrie du cannabis, avant le 17 octobre dernier, était existant et nous refusons de disparaître. Nous voulons que le gouvernement cesse d'être guidé par les intérêts corporatifs derrière les coulisses et donne une plus grande voix au peuple. Pourquoi qu'une clinique de cannabis médical se fait-elle envahir par la police pendant qu'un producteur licencié qui vend du cannabis non licencié qui a été produit d'une source illégale n'a aucune répercussion? Ceux de la clinique médicale peuvent faire face jusqu'à 14 ans de prison et les employés, comme ceux chez Bonafide, n'auraient-ils aucun trouble judiciaire? Les deux ont désobéi à la loi, mais seulement l'un des deux fait face à des conséquences. Voici ce que l'on appelle, selon nous, de l'hypocrisie gouvernementale. Les prix demeurent encore trop chers du côté légal. Quand les gens peuvent avoir accès à un meilleur produit à un prix moindre, ils continueront d'utiliser les sources non légales pour s'en procurer. La surrégulation, telle l'oligarchie avec le gouvernement ontarien, crée des problèmes d'offres économiques dans la chaîne d'approvisionnement. Ceci crée un marché stagnant et avec un manque d'offres et une grande demande. Un autre point, pourquoi le gouvernement prône-t-il un contrôle de qualité quand ces produits n'ont même pas de date d'expiration? Entre 2015 et 2016, il y a eu plus de 77 000 hospitalisations au Canada liées à l'alcool, 2 000 de plus que toutes les hospitalisations liées aux problèmes cardiaques. Il y a de 4 à 5 000 morts liées à l'alcool annuellement au Canada. Le cannabis n'a jamais tué quelqu'un par usage illicite. Nous sommes fiers que le gouvernement démontre des risques à l'usage du cannabis sur leur étiquetage, mais devrait-il faire cela avec l'alcool d'une manière plus évidente aussi? Pourquoi pouvons-nous acheter une bière ou une bouteille de vin sans avertissement qui sont énoncés clairement? La preuve est là, l'alcool et le tabac sont plus dangereux que le cannabis. Nous revendiquons au gouvernement d'arrêter la surrégulation. Ils doivent ouvrir les portes aux petits producteurs et aux cliniques médicales non licenciées pour balancer l'offre et la demande. Dans l'optique où le gouvernement ne le fait pas, il y aurait des pénuries d'offres et les consommateurs continueront d'acheter leurs produits sur le marché noir. Le gouvernement ontarien a légalisé le cannabis, mais il est pratiquement impossible de le consommer dans la province. On a un manque de bord pour aller fumer, etc. Les nombreuses lois ridicules favorisent certains groupes de personnes, tandis que d'autres groupes de gens se s'emparissent. Le cannabis est légal parce que plusieurs braves personnes ont risqué leur vie pour changer un système qui était injuste. Le cannabis est légal parce que les milliers de personnes ont renoncé à leur liberté pour faire un point. Il ne faut pas oublier que les gens qui opéraient les magasins illégaux à travers le Canada avant le 17 octobre le faisaient en désobéissance civile et ne faisaient aucun mal à personne, mais offraient un accès sain et sauf aux consommateurs. Le Canada n'a pas encore émis une excuse publique pour avoir traité comme criminels ces personnes depuis plus de 50 ans. Nous voulons que le Canada reconnaisse qu'ils ont eu tort en traitant les activistes comme des criminels. En conclusion, pensez-y, le gouvernement a voulu légaliser le cannabis pour protéger nos enfants et arrêter les criminels de profiter d'une industrie qui appartient maintenant au gouvernement. Donc, pourquoi la loi sur le cannabis n'atteint pas ses objectifs? Même si le cannabis est légal, c'est notre travail de surveiller les activités gouvernementales pour s'assurer que le monde est traité d'une manière juste. Nous ne voulons pas voir cette légalisation et ses revenus seulement être au profit des corporations privées et des gens les plus riches. Nous tous, ici, devons continuer à se battre pour assurer que le cannabis soit plus démocratique, plus accessible et plus accepté. Merci beaucoup.
Questions?
Can I just ask, for this weekend, do you have an idea of what kind of enforcement you're expecting?
We work with Parliament Police as well as RCMP. There's not going to be any sort of enforcement. They'll be there at the event like they are every single year, and they'll just keep the peace, so to speak, and make sure that nothing goes too awry.
So can you just kind of walk me through, because you talked about some of the issues that this government, that you would like government to address, how do you then see this, because this was an issue 4 years ago in a federal election, how does that issue then make it onto the agenda in this federal election, considering it's not something that any of the parties are really talking about?
It's definitely going to be something that's going to come up because it's something that is very strife with the public right now. There's a great deal in the public that are absolutely thrilled that cannabis has been legalized now, but there's even just as many people that see the problems with it and are affected by it on a daily basis. It's not relegated to the simple, average, everyday Joe. There are cannabis company executives who are going to the States and getting lifetime bans. These are serious federal issues that have to be addressed on some level. And if Trudeau's not willing to do it, I'm sure somebody else will be willing to talk about it come election.
Can you guys maybe just one more time just kind of walk through what is kind of the top pressing issue that this government needs to address?
The top pressing issue is that the government is telling people one thing and doing another. They have a very hypocritical way of approaching the laws, or the way that they've written them at the very least. For instance, the example that we used was Bonafide is a licensed producer who was selling cannabis that had been purchased from Joe down the block for all it really mattered, and they got in trouble for it. But did they get in trouble? Not really. They had the CEO step down, which was a great move, but there was no criminal sanctions. The folks that we talked about over at the medical dispensary, they're facing 14 years in jail. That's an extremely serious offense, so you can't tell me that one person should be treated one way and another shouldn't. That's a little bit ridiculous. So that's a perfect example of how the government treats one people one way and another a completely different way. And that's hypocrisy at its finest.
So what kind of crowd do you expect on Saturday? I mean, given that this is a little different. Last year was kind of the last one before the legalization. This is the first one now. What kind of crowd do you expect? Do you expect a change in the makeup of the crowd as well?
Definitely. I think the crowd will be a little bit more diverse this year than it's been in most years. I personally have lots of friends who've never attended for the simple reason that it's not been legal, and this year it is. It's also on a Saturday, and hopefully if the weather holds up, there's going to be a great ton of people that will take advantage of the opportunity to come out and experience something that you can't experience anywhere else. Nowhere else in the world does 420 happen on the steps of its government's building. It's pretty special, so I think it would definitely be a pretty big crowd, a pretty diverse one. We had 10,000 last year. I think the RCB had said 15 almost, so I think we're expecting that plus a little bit more. So hopefully, 15, 20,000. We'll see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.